Welcome back to my channel. Today, we're diving into a heart-touching story titled, Right Here, Right Now, she whispered. The rancher nodded, his hands trembling. It's a tale of love, emotion, and unspoken words that move the soul. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Where are you watching from? Let's get started. The afternoon sun hung low over the endless Montana plains, its golden light spilling across the rolling fields like liquid fire. A soft wind whispered through the dry grass, carrying the scent of dust, horses, and distant rain. Eli Thompson stood by the split-rail fence, his weathered hands gripping the wood as though holding the earth itself steady. He wore his years quietly, creases at the corners of his eyes, a few threads of gray in his hair, but his back was still straight, his presence steady. It had been 10 years since she left, and still her absence haunted this place like a song half-remembered. The ranch had aged with him. The red barn needed new paint, and the corral gate leaned a little, but it was still home, his father's land, his life's work. Every inch of it had been built with his hands, from the fences to the stables. Yet sometimes, in the silence of the fields, Eli wondered what he'd really built. Something worth keeping, or just something to keep himself from remembering her. He had buried himself in work, in long days and quiet nights, convincing himself he didn't care. Until today, he heard it before he saw it. The crunch of gravel under tires, the low hum of a truck engine slowing to a stop. Eli turned, squinting against the sun. A silver pickup sat by the old gate, the same gate she used to swing open when she'd come to visit years ago. The door opened, and Clara Hayes stepped out. Time slowed, or maybe his heartbeat just did. She looked older, sure, but still the same in ways that hurt. Her hair, once wild from the wind, was neatly tied now, and her clothes spoke more of the city than the country. But her eyes, those gray-blue eyes, were the same. For a long moment, neither spoke. The wind carried the smell of sagebrush between them, and the horses in the pasture lifted their heads to watch. Finally, she broke the silence, her voice soft but steady. "Hey, Eli." Just his name, but it cracked something open inside him. He swallowed hard, forcing his voice to sound casual, though his pulse betrayed him. "Didn't think I'd ever see you back here," he said, eyes still fixed on the horizon. She took a hesitant step closer, boots crunching against the gravel. "I didn't think I'd come back either," she admitted. "But when my father passed, I inherited the ranch next to yours." Eli's jaw tightened. He'd heard about Old Man Hayes passing, but hadn't known she was coming back. That land had been idle for years, the fences falling, the barn caving in. "A lot's changed," he said finally, his voice low. She nodded slowly. "Yeah, except this place. And maybe—" She paused, searching his face. "Maybe us." He turned then, really looking at her for the first time, and saw the weariness behind her smile. The years hadn't been kind, but they hadn't taken her light either. Still, he didn't know what to say, so he said nothing at all. The silence between them stretched thin, like the sky before a storm. Clara looked around. The same hills, the same wind, the same fence where they'd carved their initials when they were barely 20. "You kept it standing," she murmured, touching the wood. "Didn't think you would." Eli's voice softened. "Didn't think you'd ever come check." The words hung there, sharp but honest. She winced slightly, and he regretted the edge in his tone, but pride had its claws in him. She turned toward the horizon, watching the sun dip lower. "I deserved that," she said quietly. "Probably more." Eli exhaled, long and tired. "Why are you really here, Clara? Just to settle the estate?" Her gaze lingered on the land, the fields that rolled like ocean waves, the distant mountains dusted with snow. "I don't know yet," she admitted. "Maybe I just wanted to see what I left behind." Her voice trembled slightly, though she tried to hide it. Eli looked down, fingers tracing the rough wood of the fence. "You left a lot," he said softly. "Yeah," she whispered. "I know." For a moment the wind died down, and all that remained was the quiet space between two people who had once known each other too well. She turned to him then, the last light of sunset catching in her hair. "You ever think about it, Eli? About us?" He gave a short, humorless laugh. "Only when I breathe." It came out sharper than he intended, but she didn't flinch. Instead, she smiled, sad, knowing. I guess that's fair. The sky burned orange and purple, and somewhere far off, a hawk cried. It felt like the whole land was holding its breath, waiting. Well, she said after a while, I should get going. Got a lot to clean up at my place. Eli nodded, tipping his hat in that old, polite way of his. You know where to find me if you need anything. She hesitated by the truck, one hand on the door handle. Do you still ride out by the ridge? She asked almost shyly. Every morning, he said. Why? She shrugged, glancing toward the distant hills. Just wondering if some things still stay the same. He didn't answer, and she didn't wait for one. The truck engine started, the headlights cutting through the dusk. As she drove off, Eli stood there watching until the dust settled and the night began to creep in around him. Only then did he breathe out, slow and heavy, as if the air itself had been holding him captive. When he finally turned toward the barn, the world felt both too quiet and too loud. He ran his hand along the fence again, pausing where their initials were still faintly carved, E+C, weathered but not erased. He smiled bitterly. Some things, it seemed, even time couldn't quite wear down. The crickets started their evening chorus, and far off, lightning flickered across the darkening sky. He thought of her, how she had looked standing there, how the air had shifted when she spoke his name. A part of him wanted to chase after her, to say all the words he never had, but another part knew better. Instead, he turned back to his work, feeding the horses, checking the stables, pretending life hadn't just circled back on him after 10 long years. But deep down, he knew this wasn't the end. Not this time. Something had changed tonight, something quiet but unstoppable. And as the first drops of rain began to fall, Eli whispered to no one but the darkening sky. She's back. And for the first time in a decade, that thought didn't break him. It made him alive again. The storm rolled in 3 days later. The sky over the Montana plains darkened to steel, the wind sharp and restless, as though the land itself sensed something coming. Eli Thompson had seen plenty of storms, but none that made his chest feel this tight. He'd been restless all morning, working the fences, fixing what didn't need fixing. Every time he glanced toward the Hayes ranch, his stomach twisted. He hadn't seen Clara since that evening by the fence, but her presence clung to the air like the scent of rain before thunder. By late afternoon, the wind picked up, tossing dust in spirals across the yard. The horses grew uneasy, shifting in their stalls, and Eli worked quickly to close the barn doors. The first crack of thunder rolled through the sky just as he latched the last gate. He turned toward the horizon, and there she was. Clara, running through the rain, her figure small but unmistakable against the storm-lit fields. He froze, disbelief stealing his breath. She was soaked through, her hair plastered to her face, her jacket clinging to her. "Clara!" he shouted, sprinting out to meet her. She reached the barn just as the rain turned heavy, the two of them bursting inside, panting, dripping, and speechless. "What in God's name are you doing out here?" Eli demanded, his voice rough, more worried than angry. She pushed wet hair from her face, breath catching between half-laughs. "I saw the lightning hit near your ridge. I wanted to make sure the horses were okay." He stared at her, incredulous. "You crossed half a mile in a damn storm for my horses?" She shrugged, smiling faintly. "Guess old habits die hard." For a moment, neither spoke. The rain hammered against the tin roof, loud enough to drown out thought. Eli turned away, running a hand through his hair. "You shouldn't have come. It's dangerous out there." "So is running from everything," she said quietly. He stopped. Slowly, he turned back toward her, eyes narrowing as if he was afraid to hope she meant what he thought she did. "What are you talking about?" Clara looked down, water dripping from her sleeves. "About leaving. About being stupid enough to think I could walk away from this place. From you." She took a shaky breath. "I thought I needed something bigger. Cities, people, a life that didn't smell like dirt and hay. But all I found was noise. I missed this, the sound of rain on a barn roof, the quiet, the truth of it." Her voice cracked on that last word. Eli's throat tightened. "You think the truth waited 10 years for you to come back?" His words came out harsh, but his hands were trembling. You think you can just walk in here like nothing happened? She met his gaze steadily, even through the tears starting to mix with rain on her cheeks. No, I know I can't undo it. She stepped closer. Needed you to know I never stopped loving you, Eli. I tried. God knows I tried, but nothing ever came close. For a moment, silence filled the barn, thick and electric. Outside, thunder boomed, echoing her confession. Eli looked away, blinking hard. He'd dreamed of hearing those words 1,000 times, but now they burned in his chest instead of healing it. You think love fixes everything? He muttered. You think it fills in 10 years of empty nights? Clara took another step forward. No, but maybe it's a start. He wanted to believe her, wanted it more than anything, but pride still held him back. Then she did something he didn't expect. She reached out, gently taking his hand. His skin was calloused, hers soft but cold from the rain. When he didn't pull away, she placed his hand against her heart. He could feel it racing beneath his palm, fast and real. This, she whispered, voice trembling, is where I've been lost. Right here, and I don't want to be lost anymore. His breath caught. Her eyes lifted to his, steady despite the storm raging around them. Right here. Right now, she whispered, her words barely audible over the rain. The moment shattered him. Eli's chest tightened, and his throat burned with everything he'd never said. He nodded slowly, his own hands trembling as if afraid she'd vanish again. Right here, he managed to whisper back, his voice breaking. Right now. And then, as if the storm itself had paused to listen, he pulled her closer. The years between them fell away, washed clean by the rain hammering above. She pressed her forehead against his, eyes closed, breathing him in. There were no promises, no perfect words. Just the quiet understanding that this was the only place either of them had ever belonged. The thunder rolled again, but inside the barn, time stood still. Minutes, or maybe hours, passed before either of them spoke again. Clara leaned back, brushing a strand of wet hair from his face. You still keep coffee on that old stove of yours? She asked softly, a teasing glint returning to her eyes. Eli chuckled, a sound he hadn't made in years. Always, he said. You think I'd ever give up coffee? She smiled through tears. Then maybe we should start there. Coffee first, everything else later. He nodded, the corner of his mouth lifting. Coffee and a new beginning. I can live with that. They stood together at the barn door as the rain eased into a soft drizzle. The land outside gleamed silver under the pale light breaking through the clouds. Eli handed her his old denim jacket, the one he'd worn since they were kids. She slipped it on, smiling faintly. Still smells like you, she murmured. Can't help that, he said. Hard to wash out 10 years of waiting. She looked at him, eyes full of something raw and honest. Then maybe it's time we stop waiting. They walked back toward the house in silence, the wet grass brushing against their boots. The storm had broken, but its scent still lingered in the air, fresh, clean, full of promise. When they reached the porch, Eli glanced back toward the barn, then at her. You staying at your place tonight? He asked, almost shy. She tilted her head. You asking if I should? He hesitated, then smiled. I'm asking if you want to. She stepped closer, her fingers finding his. I think I already answered that. Eli squeezed her hand gently, feeling something inside him finally settle. Then come on, he said quietly. Let's start again. Not tomorrow, not someday. Right here. Right now. She smiled, tears glinting in her eyes again. But this time, they were the good kind. The kind that washed things clean. As they stepped inside, the last rays of sunset broke through the clouds, painting the ranch in gold. The world outside was still and new, like a breath held too long finally released. And somewhere in that quiet, between the rain and the light, love began again, not as it once was, but as it was always meant to be.